Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, co-host of the Tech Takeaways podcast, and here we are doing yet another show. And I'm joined this week by my dynamic co-host, Jason Fitzgerald. Hi, Jason.
Hi.
How you doing? You all
Yeah,
right?
good. Yeah,
Good.
all good.
That's
yeah.
exciting.
I like the new studio.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, we've got a nice green light above your head.
Yeah.
So that's just a green light. It's not Jason.
It's how I roll nowadays.
Comes with his own green light. It's amongst his riders. It's that and blue Smarties. I think the two things he wants. So on this week's episode, we're going to talk about kind of the anatomy of a cybersecurity incident. Recently, we've worked on a couple of incidents that we've kind of seen unfold, and we've provided a little bit of advice on how people have been able to deal with that, and some of the tooling that they can use to effectively work their way through these kind of cyber incidents. So we're going to kind of cover those things. So Jace, do you want to set a little bit of scene setting on that, because you were kind of involved in both of those incidents?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the past few weeks, we've dealt with a number of cyber incidents, but there's two that stand out actually because of the nature of one and the essentially stealth nature of the second one. So we'll kind of touch upon them both in generalities, because we're not going to be discussing any company names or anything like that. That's all protected. But we can talk about kind of how they started and how they progressed. And what we found with both of them was they started essentially in the same way. Phishing emails coming through to the organisation that ultimately were successful. These are organisations in both cases that treat their cybersecurity seriously. So it's not, a new organisation looking to secure themselves. These are both organisations that have got professionals that work for them that have just been targeted in specific ways with phishing. And what we found in both cases was actually there were key indicators from the minute that email was sent to the company to actually anything happening within the infrastructure that kind of went missed. We typically find that a lot of the cyber incidents that we're looking at, there's generally a good indicator before. In most cases, and it does depend on who you ask. 80%, in some cases 95%, as I say, it depends on who you ask, that there was some kind of indicator beforehand. And in both cases that was just missed. And so the attack was ultimately successful.
So there's a couple of things in there that I think are really interesting with this as well. And that's the idea that I think in both cases these were organisations who took their security seriously. So they weren't lax. No. And I think we see this a lot. And it was interesting that they've come from phishing emails as well, because I think phishing emails are something that we talk about a lot, and you see lots of organisations do phishing campaigns to try and educate their staff. But of course, these things are getting ever more sophisticated, and they still remain, because as the phrase goes, clickers will be clickers. They still are very much kind of a primary attack vector for cybersecurity attackers. And they're a great way of kind of deploying. They do multiple things, don't they? Often they will look to steal credentials. So they will send you off to some website that maybe looks like your company logon, and will ask for company logon credentials, and then potentially, and this was, I think, one of the things that we may have seen in one of these incidents, was potentially what they're doing is almost back to back in that logon with the
that's
real
exactly
system.
And actually that was quite a big surprise to the customer to find that, because they'd been quite diligent in rolling out MFA. So when the users were trying to log into their cloud service, they were actually getting an MFA prompt. So through a Microsoft 365 Authenticator app to authenticate it. The attackers had been really clever in that when the user had accessed the spoofed page and put in their login details, they did an immediate real-time login to including the MFA, so the user actually authenticated the MFA, and that issued a session token, what's called a session token, to the attackers, which keeps them logged in for roughly about 7 days by default. Because that had happened, they were then able to enroll one of the attacker devices against that customer account, so that if MFA was to happen again, they would be able to legitimately scan it in on one of their devices because they'd re-registered it. So it's a notion of gaining persistence. They're now persistent within a network because that has been allowed to happen. Now, there's certain controls that you can put around that with regards to only allowing MFA to be enrolled from certain places. But not a lot of organisations really think about that kind of level of granularity.
Well, I think because I think what's important with that as well for people to realise is that this is how, because we talked before about these weren't organisations who did not take cybersecurity, take it seriously.
Yeah.
And this is not the only time we've seen this kind of attack, and it just goes to show the kind of the innovation and smartness of cyber attackers.
It really is. I mean, we've spoken before about the professionalism of cyber attackers. They're not people that sit in their attic or basement or whatever wearing hoodies. That's not them. They don't act alone. These are professional organisations.
I mean, they might wear hoodies. I mean,
it's true. They might wear hoodies. Yeah. Probably do actually. But that kind of stereotypical attacker working alone is so far-fetched. Organisations have got to realise they're dealing with a professional organisation, with a HR team, with account managers that do all of that kind of stuff. They treat it as a business because that's exactly what it is. And so as the industry changes to secure things, that industry is changing to exploit that security or find a way around it. So it's a constantly moving target. And what we find is that actually keeping security staff skilled up and the organisation adequately resourced is a challenge to organisations, because not everyone can know everything. Having a team kind of brings different skill sets together, and the resource issue is real. You can't have a security professional there 24/7 looking at everything that's going on in the organisation and be expected to stay on top of it. There's always going to be flaws, and there's always going to be exploitable gaps in the infrastructure for people to come in.
So maybe to kind of look at this, because I think we can look at there's some real innovation, there's some real intelligence behind these kind of attacks.
Yeah.
And it speaks of how difficult a problem this is to solve. So looking at actually some of the work that you did for these organisations, what were the steps that you did that helped kind of identify? So what tools did they have? How did you work with those tools to help kind of identify the route that attack had taken so that they could mitigate against it in future?
Okay, so in one of the attacks, there was quite a good setup actually. So they were retaining log files for longer than what was given in Microsoft 365. So they had a logging platform which captured that information. And because that retained it for quite a while, we were able to go through and piece a minute-by-minute account of the attack itself. So when the attack happened at, say, 1 a.m., we were able to go through and say, this happened at 5 minutes to 1, this happened at 4 minutes to 1, 3 minutes to 1, at 1 o'clock this happened, and we were able to give quite an accurate, detailed picture to say, this is exactly what's happened, this is the data set that's been touched, these are the user accounts that were involved, you need to go and secure these user accounts, change the passwords, revoke MFA tokens, revoke all session tokens, secure those accounts because they are actively involved right now. But then what we're able to do with that is, because we've got those indicators, we can backtrack then through the logs to say, well, how did this happen in the first place? How did the attackers get in initially? And can we build out a more full picture? So we're not just looking at the attack itself, we're looking at 2, 3, 4 weeks prior to say, what happened during that time? And then work from that to bring in some recommendations. Now, what we did find is that timing is important. Yeah. So with hindsight, so when an attack happens, that access has happened before that, so you can go back and look. But when access is happening in this minute now, those really small signals that you get may not be given the weight that they need, because they're so small, unless they're you're seeing a couple of indicators together, you don't necessarily recognise what's going on. And so having that relevant information is really important, being able to log and retain the logs for historic records and reflection. How do we stop this from happening again?
Was it useful, kind of in that example as well, is it useful to be able to apply that context then? Because you said there, and I think we've seen this in a couple of incidents, not necessarily these ones we're talking about, but actually other incidents as well, where it's not been one action that's necessarily, there's kind of been one action eventually that everybody's noticed and gone, oh no, that's a breach or that's an incident. But it's been all of those kind of little, almost unrelated incidents that have happened.
Like
so
how
easy is it to kind of correlate that stuff together and, so that it may be, and is that a useful way of more quickly being able to see potential threat?
So the breadcrumbs are kind of, by itself, they don't really lead you anywhere, but once you see a few of them together, they start to form a path for you to follow. And so capturing that information is really important, but kind of being able to recognise that is important as well. So, having a suitably skilled team that can do it. So having that in place is really useful. But the timing of recognising those elements are important as well. So, for example, in this case, we found that actually the tool had captured some information but hadn't actually reported any intelligence on it for about 36 hours. Well, if that 36 hours was minus 36 hours as in when it was happening, and we were seeing this event, then this event, then this event, that's a different story. So that can lead us that way. And, this is where tools like MDR come in. We deal a lot with MDR services. We partner with Sophos for delivering that. And what that gives you is the access into those experts, that team who have got all of this telemetry coming in, who know what they're looking at in real time, who can flag this in real time. So the window between the breadcrumbs from being produced and someone actually recognising them is a lot smaller, which kind of lets me talk about the second case, which is a smaller case. It is a smaller one, but essentially but it is a good example, because I know where the story's going, but it's a good example of actually having the right tools, aggregating lots of telemetry together, can very rapidly spot a problem. Exactly. It can flag something it would otherwise go unnoticed, which is exactly what happened. We were deploying some MDR software for this customer. We were using Sophos MDR. We interlinked it with the M365 platform. And within 5 minutes, and there's some debate in our tech team whether it was 5 minutes or 3 minutes, but it's within that time frame.
Should we say 4? Just for
let's average it out. I'd say 4. So 4 minutes later, the customer actually received an email to say there's an account that's been compromised, and it's actually a global admin. You need to be aware of this because they've got unlimited access to your M365, and it was the IT admin that we were actually working with on the phone call to get it integrated in the first place. So they'd kind of looked at it and disregarded it as you're now onboarded, and we'd said, no, this is actually an incident that has been investigated and has been flagged to you, and that's within 4 minutes of being integrated. So it's that kind of window between, we're looking at 36 hours versus 4 minutes with a skilled team.
There's an awful lot you can do in 35 hours.
There's a lot of risk in that 35 hours,
So well, look, we call this tech takeaways for a reason. So, so for people watching and listening to this, is there based on some of the things you saw in those kind of recent incidents, is there a couple of tips that people can take away and can use?
I think so. So as a takeaway, I would say retain your logs for as long as you can. Within reason, but retain your logs for longer to give you that backtrack of incident investigation for the team that you've got in place to investigate it properly. And if you don't have a team in place, look at MDR options, so managed detection and response options, to resource you appropriately to protect your organisation.
Great tips. And I think that's some really useful insight. I think it's always handy to be able to share kind of real world experience of some of these kind of things, so that you can kind of learn how to deal with this, and then we can share that with the viewers of this fine show. So, so Jake, as always, great insight. So thank you for that.
No worries.
And if you enjoyed the show, then do give the show a thumbs up, as you kids do on the YouTubes and that. And if you, and you want to make sure you catch next Tech Takeaways and do subscribe, you can subscribe here on YouTube, and you can subscribe in All Good Homes of Podcasts and possibly some Bad Homes of Podcasts as well, because you can find us there too. So until next time, Jason, thanks a lot, and we'll see you again all very soon.